The hot stove is kind of simmering a little right now. But do you know what team I'm actually kind of impressed with this offseason? The Royals.
You are Locked On MLB. Your daily MLB podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, baseball fans. Welcome to Locked On MLB, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. This is the daily podcast. We talk about all of Major League Baseball. I am your host. My name is Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully. I am an Emmy-nominated television producer who's been a baseball podcaster for well over a decade now, and I'm getting ready to start my 6th season here at the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Follow us on Twitter or whatever it's called now, and on Instagram at Locked On MLB Pods. You can follow me. I'm your pal Sully. I'm at Sully Baseball on Twitter, Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. Follow us on YouTube. We're trying to get 1 billion subscribers. Please help us get to that point. We're several hundred million shy. And if you're one of the people who are listening to us, by the way, thanks so much for making us your first listen every day. If you are listening to us every day, if you leave a comment, someone make sure to have the hashtag #EveryDaySully, so I know who's listening to us every stinking day. Hey, this particular episode of Locked On MLB is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Well, today, and you'll probably know this if you saw the YouTube thumbnail or whatever you're listening to it, I'm not flying solo today. I'm bringing in a brand spanking new guest. In fact, he has that fresh new host smell. He is the new star, our new host of Locked On Royals, making his first appearance on the show. It's Jack Johnson. How you doing, buddy?
Hey, I'm doing great over here. It's obviously been a busy week, so no better time to hop on the show than now.
Yeah, in fact, I've been wanting to have, I try to have as many of the hosts on as I can. And I was like, oh, I've not had the new Royals host on. I'll get him on someday. And you'll find out if you've not been following us closely, because if you've been subscribed to this podcast, you'll assume the only thing happening in baseball is the Shohei Ohtani contract. The Kansas City Royals, your team, is having very quietly but very significantly a very good offseason. And one, at the end of the year, like when the Diamondbacks were in the World Series or the Phillies were in the World Series last year, and someone looks around like, how the hell did that team sneak into the playoffs? Are the Royals going to be that team for 2024? We're going to find out soon. But first and foremost, we got to answer the trivia question. And Manuel Margot came over to Los Angeles in the trade where they brought in the Glasnow, who I believe is in a full body cast, and they signed him to an extension. Margot came also in the trade, and the question was, what all-star did the Red Sox trade minor leaguer Manuel Margot for many, many years ago? Jack Johnson, do you know the answer to the question? Chev Chelios does.
Oh, man.
Putting you on the spot.
Yeah, I know. The name that comes to mind, I can't remember if they signed or traded for him, but would Adrian Gonzalez be the answer?
Really, really good guess. That was a little bit before this. It was actually Craig Kimbrell. They traded for Craig Kimbrell. Remember, Craig Kimbrell was a Padre for about an hour and a half, and they traded for him, and there you go. No, Adrian Gonzalez was after the 2010 season, led directly to the debacle of 2011. But hey, before we jump into Kansas City, I'm going to go over a couple things. I hinted the fact that the Dodgers pulled off the trade that they traded Pepio and DeLuca, and they want to bring in Tyler Glasnow and Manuel Margot. Look at Tyler Glasnow is a very talented pitcher when healthy, but he's never healthy. and they've just signed him to a long-term deal where they're expecting him to throw more healthy seasons than he has in his entire career. I know you're following a small budget team, and some of these moves are too rich for your blood. But when you see some of the moves like this, do you think this is the kind of thing that could backfire on a team like the Dodgers?
It's a great question in regards to the Dodgers, but I think everybody knew even after Ohtani signed there that pitching was going to be a problem, right? They still needed to round out this rotation, and they've got so many guys that have tremendous upside but haven't stayed healthy, right? Dustin May's one of them. You've got another guy in Walker Buehler. At one point, you're talking about a future ace, and then all of a sudden he can't stay healthy. Yeah. Glasnow's another one of those guys, but I think they're just going into this saying, hey, if you get the healthy version of Tyler Glasnow, he is that ace that can take you to the next level. Now, the kicker is Tyler Glasnow is not that great of a postseason pitcher, which I think raised a lot of red flags. But right now, these are the big moves they need to be making. I mean, if you're the Dodgers, you are giving up young talent, but when did the Dodgers really need to ever fear about giving up young talent? The last one I can recall, of course, Yordan Alvarez, when they made that trade. But overall, it's a team that can spend up there with anybody in the league. They can go out there and get whoever they want. And this is one of those moves. They said, we're not going to try to piece together this rotation with, second-tier guy or third-tier guys. Tyler Glasnow can be an ace. Just the big question is, can he ever stay healthy?
Yeah, I'm telling you, it's one of these things that I would get nervous about, because you're asking him to do something he doesn't normally do. Now, in the tale of two pitchers that I mentioned in a previous episode, that the Rangers acquired two injury-prone pitchers going into last year. DeGrom, who when healthy isn't one of the best pitchers in baseball, is the best pitcher in baseball when he's healthy. But I knew, and you knew, and we all knew he was going to get hurt. And the other pitcher they got was Eovaldi. And, well, he did spend a little bit of time in the IL. He wound up doing what the Dodgers hope they're going to get out of Glasnow. That they got the good, healthy year out of that. You give us one or two, whatever happens in Eovaldi's contract, he did exactly what he was supposed to do in Texas. And that's kind of the model that they better have for Glasnow. Like, okay, you're not going to be a 250 innings eating pitcher. I don't think those exist anymore. But please pull a Nathan Eovaldi. Please be healthy enough and win one or two games in October so that we can get any criticism off our back.
Yeah, I mean, that is kind of the immense pressure right now on the Dodgers. I mean, even if they just would have gotten Shohei Ohtani alone, the pressure is, yeah, you got to go win the whole thing now. You can't fall short even in the NLCS and say successful season, because the Dodgers over the last 10 years or so, a lot of first place finishes, a lot of 100-win seasons. I think their worst season in the last decade was 91 wins. And this team feels like the most star-studded of the bunch. But yeah, you are going to need that guy who can anchor your rotation. And even if Tyler Glasnow has maybe the exact same season that Nathan Eovaldi had, I think you take that if the Dodgers get to the World Series and win it, because whether he was great, elite, or average, but if they win the World Series, in my opinion, it's worth it if he can stabilize and anchor that rotation.
They've had the combination of Mookie Betts and Freddie Freeman as teammates, which people thought was extravagant then before Ohtani. And they've combined for 200-win seasons and one postseason game that they've won. Mm-hmm. And that's the great equalizer. That's all anyone remembers. And, of course, the big fish out there is Yamamoto. It sounds like the Red Sox are offering the sun, the moon, the stars, and the sky. The Yankees are offering the sun, the moon, the stars, and the sky. The Dodgers are. I stand by my prediction. I do think he's going to land. I think he's going to land in San Francisco. But remember, all my predictions are always wrong. So you got to keep that with a grain of salt there.
Yeah, I mean, he is kind of at this point next to Snell, the biggest fish left in the pond for the pitching market. I'm sure you could throw Marcus Stroman in there as a top tier guy, but not in the same stratosphere as those two. And with Yamamoto, I think the only red flag for me is if these years are true, 10, 11, 12-year contract, you're giving that type of security to a guy who's never pitched in Major League Baseball. Like that, I think, is unprecedented territory. With Shohei Ohtani, of course, it was different. You're talking about a two-way player and maybe the most popular player to ever come out of Japan. with Yamamoto, I think he's going to be an elite pitcher. I think he's going to be just fine when he signs that big time deal. But it's going to be whoever is willing to go that extra mile, because right now I don't think it's necessarily just about the price tag. I think they want that big 10, 11, 12-year contract, which who is going to be that team? The Giants would be an excellent fit. I know we've heard a lot of Mets, a lot of Yankees, a lot of Red Sox. We know those four are definitely going to be in the hunt there. But to me, it's the years for it, not so much the price tag.
Well, look at – oh, boy. Oh, for my fans in Australia, I said look it. So do a shot. There you go. Do a shot every time I say look it. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about one of the – well, team may not have the deep pockets that the Cubs, the Mets, the Giants, and the Yankees may have, and the Dodgers. But they have some big ideas and don't have some of the obstacles that some of those big market teams do indeed have. Hey, let's talk a little bit about FanDuel. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. And right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's 150 buccarinos if your team wins. If you're thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time than right now to get on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and send off this NFL season. FanDuel is an official partner of the National Football League. Oh, quick little thing to remind you, Locked On has launched the first ever 24/7 national sports streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus national shows like this one covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Okay, well, we're here with Jack Johnson. Jack Johnson versus Sullivan would have been a hell of a boxing match about 130 years ago. You are the new host of Locked On Royals. I don't know a thing about you. Are you in Kansas City? Are you in Portugal? Where the heck are you? And then tell us a little bit about you before we cannonball into the Royals off season.
Yeah, I've lived in Kansas City my whole life. I'm based here now. I work in sports radio up here in Kansas City at Sports Radio 810 WHB. Got a show over there on that channel. Also got a show on 1510 ESPN Kansas City. So we talk all things sports. Pretty much my world, it revolves around sports. But baseball's always been my thing. Baseball is my passion. Whether the Royals, of course, win the World Series in 2015 or they have years like last year, passion doesn't really change for me. I love covering this team. And, you know, it's been a long time since we've seen them have an off season like this, which, of course, is kind of getting those competitive juices flowing again, not only just for me, but for everybody here in Kansas City.
I'm old enough that I remember the George Brett years.
Oh, yeah.
I remember when the Royals were one of the elite teams that you just expect them in the playoffs year in and year out. And for those of you who don't remember, at the time, the Royals and the Yankees were actually one of the most heated rivalries in the sport. It was intense when Kansas City played the Yankees, and they seemed to face off in the American League Championship Series almost every year. Mm-hmm. And it was also a time when Ewing Kauffman owned the team, and they used to spend money. I mean, one of the trivia questions I had just a few days ago was about the only time that the two Cy Young Award winners were from the previous season were teammates the next year. And that was when Mark Davis won the Cy Young Award with the Padres and was a free agent and signed with Kansas City to be teammates with Brett Saberhagen. Now, it didn't work, but there was also a time when the single biggest high-profile baseball player, the most famous baseball player in America was Bo Jackson. And Bo Jackson had, I mean, I actually feel badly for people who didn't see the Bo Jackson era, because it was a pre-social media world, so everything was done through highlight shows and ESPN and everything like that. But he was like Paul Bunyan. It was like he was a mythical character almost, and the way he could play football at an elite level. He could play baseball at an elite level. When he hit home runs, they weren't just clearing the fence. They, just bombs the straightaway center. He would catch a ball and run up the side of the wall like Spider-Man. It was an absolutely marvelous time to be a baseball fan and to just be a Kansas City fan. So, you know, I'm happy that Royals fans got the fun that they had in the middle 2010s. But let's go over what's happening right now, because the Royals had a horrid season last night. There's no getting around it. Let's not sugarcoat. They lost 106 ball games. So, you know, they probably will go up. But one thing they've been doing this offseason is they've been very quietly improving their pitching staff. And Jack, why don't you go through and tell us a little bit your thoughts about some of the, I think, the very savvy moves that they've been making in this offseason?
Yeah, I think you have to go back to about a month ago. They made a future type of move in trading Jackson Kowar, who they were already going to non-tender, and got Kyle Wright in return, who, of course, won 20-plus games for Atlanta. He's out for the whole year. But also Jackson Kowar had one of the worst career numbers, I mean, of anybody pitching with a, you know, minimal amount of innings. Like, it wasn't just like he had one outing. I mean, you're talking about 40 to 50 career innings, and his ERA was north of 9. So J.J. Bacole in the front office said, hey, here's a guy that maybe down the road we can count on. But these are the type of moves that we have to start acting on to make ourselves seem more savvy. But not just with those moves. We got to improve the 2024 roster, and especially that pitching rotation, because the Royals in the Central last year, like, offensively, they weren't great. Nobody in the Central was that great, but they were second in average behind Minnesota. They were second in slugging, second in OPS. It was the pitching staff that completely torpedoed everything for this team. And so they go out there, help out the bullpen a little bit with Nick Anderson. They go get Will Smith, you know, trying to anchor down some spots there. They get Matt Sauer in the Rule 5 draft from New York, who's got tons of upside. And then they go after some guys in the rotation. You know, Michael Wacha, who they just recently got, he was a big piece they were always rumored to be interested in. And Seth Lugo, I mean, he was a guy I predicted Kansas City to get in the offseason, because last year they were interested, but Lugo, of course, took the deal in San Diego. This year, they didn't want him going anywhere else. They wanted Seth Lugo to come in, and the fact that, you know, he'll probably be a number 3 behind Wacha and Reagans, that makes Royals fans feel a lot better just about the floor of this team. Because what I think the goal was for 2024 in a very weak Central, give yourself a chance. Raise the floor of this team, where when they really are in a downward spiral, they're going through those slumps that every team has. They don't snowball into 10 or 11 or 12 game losing streaks like they would last year. It may only be 4 or 5, because instead of going to some 4A guy on a Sunday getaway game, you could turn to Michael Wacha. You could turn to Seth Lugo. And I think that was the big message. You got to raise the floor of this team if you want to get some support from the fan base.
Yeah, and I think that if I'm a Royals fan, I'm very happy with what they're doing. I mean, everyone knows they're not going to be into Yamamoto. They're not going to be into Shohei Ohtani. But they are not just shrugging and say, what you going to do? And I love the right move, because you made the great point. It cost them nothing. It cost them a guy they weren't even going to keep. And Wright, a few years ago, was basically pitched like an all-star. And if he comes back in 2025 or into 2026 and is okay, I mean, I'm not talking expected to be a 20-game winner again. I don't really look at win-loss, but that still sounds cool, a 20-game winner. But, you know, I'm not expecting him to be an ace. But if he's okay, then you've picked up an okay pitcher for nothing. And you're bringing in Lugo. You know, Lugo is okay. You know, Wacha is fine. And you take a look at the pitching rotation they had this last year. You know, I mean, Reagan's had some promise, you know, and we all love Zach Greinke. We all want to hug Zach Greinke. Everyone else was rancid. No. And okay and fine is better than rancid. So right away you could say, well, our worst part of it is improved, and the fact they've developed they're developing a franchise player in Witt. You know, Melendez was okay. I mean, he wasn't great, but he had some pop. And they had a couple other young players who showed up that you're like, okay, there's some pop here. There's some potential here. And Salvador Perez is the new Yadier Molina. You know, he's the Missouri-based World Series champion who's just, you know, you can rely on. There's an element to this team that I look at and think, okay, at least they're trying. And let's say, it's a disaster. Let's say things, the rug pulled. You could deal Wacha and you could deal Lugo and you can replenish the farm. Not that I necessarily think that's going to happen, but I'm all in on what they're doing. I think what they're doing is smart.
Well, I mean, the bittersweet thing that happened to them is the lottery system put them picking 6th overall, right? So the Royals lose 106. 2 teams in their division that finished ahead of them, they're picking ahead of them. Cleveland gets the number 1 overall pick, and Chicago gets the 5th, I believe it was. So the Royals looked at that and said, what's the incentive to lose anymore, right? If we can beat Cleveland, let's say we spend like we did, we win 76 games, we theoretically could get the number 1 overall pick. We need to stop playing the odds and the chance system because it clearly hasn't worked out the last 2 years.
And you can get a good pick at 6 too. This isn't This isn't the NBA. This isn't the NFL. Yeah. I mean, forget what was it? Trout was 23rd in the draft. I mean, like you would get, bust out your scouting department and get someone good. I mean, if the first 3 picks go to like college pitchers, then get the best high school player available. I mean, come on, there's still there'll be someone really good there. And forget about passing Cleveland on the in the draft there. What else happened in the Central? The Twins lost Gray. The Twins lost a couple of solid pitchers. Cleveland's in full rebuild mode right now. Now, of course, we know how Cleveland rebuilds, that they'll pull in and suddenly they'll drag some guy out of their farm system who's a Cy Young contender. So I sleep on Cleveland at your own peril. But Detroit's not winning piddly-poo this year. And wait, who am I missing in did I just say the White Sox? Okay, I'm sorry. The White Sox and the Tigers aren't winning piddly-poo this year. The Twins may take a step back. You're not 100% sure what's going on with Cleveland. If I'm Kansas City, I'm looking around going, wait a minute. 88 wins could win this division. And I've always wanted to see a team do this. And maybe Kansas City will be that team. I've always wanted to see a team that lost 100 and some odd games like KC did last year and just go to the free agent market when there's a bunch of guys just hanging around, not being signed, and just put a major leaguer at every position and roll the dice. That's almost what the Red Sox did in 2013, although to be fair, they still had Ortiz, Pedroia, and John Lester. But I would love to see the Royals kind of do like, all right, any hole we have, let's put a major leaguer there. And if they flame out or a minor leaguer takes their spot, fine. But why not? This is the Central. You don't have to compete with the Dodgers. You don't have to compete with the Astros.
Yeah, and that's what I was trying to tell a lot of fans out there is like when you take the Royals' chances and like Boston's chances competing against now Baltimore, the Yankees, the Rays, the Blue Jays, like you'd absolutely want to be in the Central. And plus with the Royals, they weren't tied up in any payroll. Like they had this flexibility for a long time. But going back to the old regime under Dayton Moore, the goal was they wanted to lose games, get high draft picks, get a lot of stars, build it up the same way they did in 2013, 14, and 15 is that you got to lose, build a good farm system. They win together, then you go spend. That just doesn't happen in Major League Baseball anymore, especially not with the way the Royals won it back then, where the offense wasn't that great. It was just an elite bullpen, okay rotation. You have to be willing to spend to speed up this process, and the Royals have missed on so many draft picks over the course of 10 to 15 years. That's why fans are a little bit hesitant about the 6th overall pick. It's like there could be a good player there, but they almost never go to the Royals. Like Bobby Witt Jr. was 2nd overall. Like it was an easy pick. He just fell right into their laps. When they have to go a little bit further, it can be a little bit risky. But they also brought in Brian Bridges, who came over from San Francisco, spent a long time in Atlanta. He's now helping with the scouting department. So that, I think, has already been a huge bonus. But for the immediate, for the now, and especially with the downtown stadium looming or where they want to go to, you got to show the fans that 106 losses, it's not acceptable. You have to make this team competitive. And I said back in June of last year, I'm like, they could lose 110 games. There is nothing about the Central that scares me for 2024. They can go sign a couple of guys for the rotation, help out the bullpen, get a corner outfield bat, and say, we trust Bobby Witt Jr., Vinny Pasquantino, Michael Garcia, MJ Melendez, and say, you start hot in April, which they never do, and then you can maybe stay in it by the All-Star break. Hey, that's good for a starting point for the Royals. But the Central, we know how bad it is. It's not good at all. It's anybody's game. Minnesota, as you just pointed out, they're still the favorite, and they should be the favorite. Sonny Gray walked away. Kenta Maeda walked away. And they're not being as active. And typically over the last couple of years, with the exception of Carlos Correa, they haven't been that active. They've kind of been sitting back on their heels. They wait for things to happen. Cleveland, they pump out pitching talent, but offensively, they weren't very good. Detroit spent with Javi Baez and Eduardo Rodriguez a couple years ago. Erod's now gone. They added in Kenta Maeda. They just got Jack Flaherty, Mark Canha. But the Central hasn't made a lot of big-time moves just yet. And for the Royals to raise the floor, no, I don't think they're going to win the division. But if you give yourself a chance, that's what everybody here in Kansas City wants. Go into April giving fans a reason to show up to the ballpark, support this team, and go, hey, we're not done by week 2.
Last segment with Jack Johnson. Quick question. You mentioned before, I've been to Kauffman Stadium. I love Kauffman Stadium. It was the only city that did the multi-stadium thing correctly by put a football stadium next to a baseball stadium instead of a cookie cutter. All those other ones are torn down. Kauffman survived. But it sounds like they are going to be trying to move to downtown Kansas City. What's the story with the stadium situation there?
Yeah, it is one that makes you pull your hair out, because there's been so many conflicting reports of, they want to move downtown, but they're not getting the support. Then North Kansas City's an option. Then maybe moving the team to Kansas is an option, because, of course, they're on the Missouri side. Like, all of these things factoring in, like, there hasn't been a ton of progress publicly made yet. And it hasn't made matters great that the team's come out of 106 losses, which is when the Royals are really trying to push this. It was like, why should we pay for a downtown stadium when they're not even putting money on the field to win baseball games? So that part definitely caused a lot of tension. But as of right now, I think the goal is still to move downtown, get a spot for a ballpark downtown, because the revenue is going to shoot up for this team. Like right now, I love Kauffman Stadium. It is a beautiful ballpark right next to Arrowhead Stadium, the Truman Sports Complex, but there's nothing else around there. There's nowhere to go. If the team's getting blown out, you got to go home.
Yeah, and it is. Driving out there, it was a beautiful place to see a baseball game. But the only thing around it was those bands with the guys with the banjo, and that's it. So if you want to have any walking around situation, that it's a highway. It's like and it was the right place to build a ballpark then.
Yeah,
but it's not where ballparks are now.
There's a Denny's across the highway if you're into Grand Slams and stuff.
Oh, that's right. Well, then forget it. Let's just stay at Kauffman.
Yeah, stay there just for the Denny's alone. But downtown has a beautiful bar district, power and light district. That's right next to now the T-Mobile Center used to be the Sprint Center where they had the Big 12 tournament. So there's things to do down there. And people are like, man, if we go to a game, we can make a day out of it. We're spending money at Power and Light. We're going to the game. Hey, they win. We're going back to Power and Light. We're going out to dinner before the game. And I think that's what John Sherman and the Royals ownership envisions happening. But first things first, for a lot of fans, like, they want to see winning. If you can win, we'll support this downtown stadium. But I always say, hey, this is years down the road. You need to get it confirmed now. But like, the team could be a winner 3-4 years down the road. They're not moving this team right now downtown. Like, it's going to take some time. And hopefully this year, if winning comes, more support comes with that.
All right. Well, it's been a lot of fun having you on the show today, Jack Johnson. And let's do today's trivia question, and we'll keep it Royals-centric. And here's the question. The all-time hits leader for the Kansas City Royals is obviously George Brett. He got 3,154 hits. Here's the trivia question. Don't you answer this, Jack. Which Royals Hall of Famer, not in the Baseball Hall of Fame, Royals Hall of Fame, is the only other Royal in their history to reach the 2,000 hit barrier? George Brett's the only one to get to 3,000. Only one other reached 2,000. That's your trivia question. There have been a lot of great Royals players, a lot of great Royals hitters. Think about who got to 2,000. Put the answers down here on YouTube or on Twitter, whatever the hell it's called now. And a quick reminder that Locked On has launched the first ever National Sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top stories of the day with local experts like Jack and the national shows like me. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube. Subscribe to the first ever National Sports 24/7 streaming channel. Talking about KC and not the barbecue with Jack Johnson from Locked On Royals. This has been Locked On MLB. I'm your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully.